Okay, welcome to Unit 3, Video 12. In the previous two videos, what we've seen is changes that happen at first in the culture that lead to changes in social institutions in a general way. Last time I said that what we're going to talk about today is two big problems that come from this. And we're going to, but before we do, I do want to stress this is a trade-off. It would be ridiculous to say, well, we created rationalization and capitalism, and those two things are just bad, and we never should have done that. Any change that you make to the machine is going to have consequences, and you're not always going to see the consequences. Generally speaking, somebody wins when a change happens, and other people lose when a change happens. You want to, as much as you can, not think about good or bad, although I'll make an argument at some point that particularly with regard to social locations, it probably is more reasonable to think about it that way. But with regard to rationalization and capitalism, you don't want to think that. We've gotten great things out of both of these, and the fact that I'm going to focus on two problems right now shouldn't diminish the accomplishments that have been made. Without rationalization, without capitalism, we don't discover cures for diseases that have been killing people for hundreds of years. We aren't able to deal with climate change to the extent that we are dealing with it, which is not great, but to the extent that we are, it has to do with us being able to organize ourselves well. And one of the big ideas that's been used is the idea of turning individual profit into ways of saving the planet. So these are not, even though I'm going to deal with two big problems, these are not wholly bad, why did we ever do this type of ideas. Okay, something else that I want you to notice is I've reversed. I usually put thoughts above, behaviors below. Obviously, that was an arbitrary thing for me to do in the first place. It doesn't make any difference. They're both outcomes. You turn this little individual over here, process them through the machine, and they become behaviors and thoughts. Behaviors and thoughts of the product. The reason I'm putting them this way is I'm going to make the argument that rationalization probably does more, or at least the problem that I'm going to deal with today is a behavioral problem that comes from rationalization. Rationalization, in a week or so, we will talk about some of the consequences it has for our thoughts as well. And capitalism, we're going to deal more with in terms of thoughts. Okay, the big problem that if you organize social institutions according to rationalization, if you decide we're going to just be efficient, do things as efficiently as possible, the behavioral outcome for our species is we lose autonomy. Autonomy meaning your ability to direct yourself, to create your own way of doing things. To the extent that we embrace efficiency as an end-all, be-all value, to the extent that we do that, what we're saying is, me, you, in whatever we're doing, we're not going to do it the way we would want to do it. And it bears a moment to think through the fact that sometimes doing things inefficiently is more enjoyable. For you to do something in an artistic way, in a creative way, is not necessarily the most efficient way of doing things, but it might be a more satisfying way of doing things, and that's a completely valid organizing principle. We could organize things instead of based on efficiency. We could organize them based on what is going to be the most fulfilling for people. Now, we've decided not to do that for the most part. We've decided to organize things based on rationalization. And when you do that, when you say you don't get to pick the way you want to do it, you're going to do it the way that is most efficient, we lose autonomy. That's a problem. Then I'll leave it at that. For capitalism, this is going to affect our thinking, and I alluded to this last time. the way it changes our thinking is that we become more competitive. Obviously, because that's what capitalism is about. We become more competitive and less cohesive. Cohesive meaning, and it's a term that I brought up as one of the functions of the collective consciousness is to stick us together. To cohere is to stick. But think about the fact that we live in one of the most capitalistic societies that has ever existed, and think about the fact that, and this doesn't mean this is bad, this is the trade-off, right? We get amazingly cool stuff because individuals are free to create whatever sort of business they want to. That's good, and they do that so that they can make an individual profit. We benefit from that in some ways. Some of the amazing medicines, the amazing technology we have, those are good things. But we also are fairly callous to the poor in our society. When I was in Albuquerque last week, you had people who were homeless asking for money all the time. Most people will just walk right by, even though I've got money to spare, right? I mean, I'm not rich, but I'm a middle-class person. Can I afford to give a person on the street $3 if they ask? Absolutely. But my thinking has been affected by the fact that I've been processed through a machine that says individuals should be looking out for their own self-interest. That's what capitalism's about. I have become more competitive. I look at me giving that person money as I'm losing something. I'm losing something in that transaction. I get nothing out of that. And therefore, I care less about that person. We have less cohesion in our society because of that. Now, first of all, I gave the guy money. Second of all, these two ideas, losing our autonomy, becoming less cohesive. Think about what we evolved to be. We evolved to be in groups of 100 people, right? You were not competitive with those people. I mean, maybe you played games where you were competing, but you guys were in it together. We were all in it together. And our behavior was self-directed. I mean, yes, there was influence from other people. Yes, absolutely. But it wasn't you can't do things this way because it's not efficient. We've changed. This is part of the experiment that we're going through. Again, I don't want to make it sound like, well, we should all throw away our technology and go back and live on the savannas of Africa. We absolutely should not do that. But it is worth thinking about. We've gained a tremendous amount, but we've also lost something. You put this animal into a machine, you change the machine, there are going to be changed consequences for that animal. And that's the point. To conclude this, there was a sociologist named Georg Simmel. He was German, so you pronounce George Georg, who had a really interesting insight into this. He's not a guy, you can read about him in the textbook if you'd like. He's not one of the, usually when we think about the big names in sociology, we think Karl Marx, Emil Durkheim, and Max Weber. Georg Simmel's like B team. Brilliant, but B team. He said, this is how we're setting things up, right? We're setting things up based on rationalization and capitalism. What does that mean in a general way for how things are going to go? And his insight was this. When you do this, you greatly expand the material culture of a people. You set up the machine this way, they're going to produce amazing things, and that's good. But this was his insight. This was his brilliance. He said, but the greater the external material culture, the less the interior culture for an individual. In other words, we expand what exists for us to consume, and we shrink what is, arguably the most important parts of ourselves. So think about that. It doesn't mean that you should like throw away your TV or anything like that, but it does suggest, again, that's part of the water that we're in. We tend to have all of this stuff around us and potentially a more impoverished interior life. God, that's thoroughly depressing. Sorry. Things will probably get better though. So in conclusion, modern social institutions have been shaped by rationalization and by individualization. These allow efficient and secure meeting of the group's needs, the nation's needs, but there are definitely some disadvantages for individuals. All right, that's it. I will be back in the next video, which will be the last one on social institutions, to just sort of, this has all been introductory to social institutions. We really haven't talked about any particular ones. I'll give you a little list and talk about sort of the way we should conceptualize them, what needs they're supposed to be meeting. We'll do that in the next video.